On February 23, 2025, a quiet Sunday morning in Jackson, Mississippi turned tragic when a 911 dispatcher received a frantic call. "I shot my husband, please hurry. I'm trying CPR but he's not responding." The desperate voice belonged to Rashan Wallace, a 30-year-old licensed practical nurse. The same hands trained to heal were now covered in her husband's blood, desperately trying to revive him after firing a bullet that would end his life. Domain Reed, 33, lay dying on their bedroom floor, all because of a Facebook friend request that had appeared on his wife's phone less than 2 hours earlier. The woman who allegedly shot and killed her husband was given a $50,000 bond in Jackson Municipal Court. Police say around 11:30 yesterday morning, 30-year-old Rashan Wallace shot and killed 33-year-old Domain Reed after an argument over social media escalated. It happened on Brook Hollow Drive in Jackson. Wallace is charged with murder. What makes this case particularly disturbing isn't just the sudden violence that erupted in this Mississippi home, it's how quickly an ordinary morning transformed into a homicide scene. How does a trained healthcare professional, someone who pledges to do no harm, end up taking the life of her spouse? The answer lies in something seemingly trivial, a social media notification on a smartphone screen. Yes, you heard that correctly. A Facebook friend request set off a chain of events that would end with Domain Reed dead on his bedroom floor and his wife facing murder charges. In the age where our digital lives intertwine with our physical relationships, this case stands as a stark warning of how virtual connections can trigger real-world consequences. The notification that appeared on Rashan's phone that morning might have seemed innocent enough, just another person wanting to connect online. But to Domain, it represented something far more threatening. What thoughts race through someone's mind in that fraction of a second between pulling a trigger and watching a loved one fall? What series of decisions and emotions transform domestic disagreements into deadly confrontations? Have you ever witnessed how quickly a relationship can disintegrate over something that seemed minor at first? Your experiences might help others recognize dangerous patterns before they turn deadly. Domain Reed was originally from Atlanta, Georgia, but had made Jackson, Mississippi his home. Those who knew him described him as a man with strong opinions and firm boundaries in his relationships. He had built what friends called generational wealth through various business ventures, though the specific nature of his work remains unclear from public records. Rashan Wallace had followed an unusual path to her nursing career. Once an aspiring rapper whose dreams of musical success never materialized, she channeled her energy and determination into healthcare instead. Her social media posts captured both sides of her personality, the dedicated healthcare worker and the vivacious woman who once dreamed of music stardom. Healthcare professionals like Rashan often develop a heightened sense of empathy and crisis management skills through their training and daily experiences with patients. Yet, as this case demonstrates, professional capabilities don't always translate to personal relationships. The couple's home on Brook Hollow Drive appeared ordinary from the outside, a typical residence in their Jackson neighborhood where neighbors generally kept to themselves. Like many modern couples, Domain and Rashan maintained active social media presences, which would ultimately play a central role in the tragedy that unfolded. Jackson, known as the City with Soul, is Mississippi's capital and largest city. Centrally located and nestled at the crossroads of Interstates 55 and 20, the city has a crime rate that is lower than the national average for property and violent crime. But statistics offer cold comfort when tragedy strikes so close to home. The 5,300 block of Brook Hollow Drive would soon become the focus of police activity, media attention, and community speculation. Friends later reported noticing subtle tensions between the couple in the months leading up to February 2025. Their disagreements often centered around social connections and perceived boundaries. Rashan's expanding network of online contacts had become a particular point of contention. What might seem like normal social networking to many became, for Domain, a source of suspicion and concern. They seemed fine on the surface, one neighbor would later tell investigators, but you could sometimes hear them arguing about who she was talking to online. He seemed very protective, maybe too protective. This dynamic, a husband concerned about his wife's online interactions, isn't uncommon in the digital age. Many relationships struggle to establish clear boundaries around social media connections. For Domain and Rashan, these disagreements had been simmering beneath the surface of their marriage, occasionally boiling over into heated arguments before cooling down again. The morning of February 23rd began like any other Sunday. Sunshine filtered through the windows of their Brook Hollow Drive home. Rashan had checked her phone notifications as millions do each morning. Among them was a friend request, a simple digital gesture that would trigger the final confrontation in their relationship. What made this particular friend request different from the countless others that flow through social media platforms every second? The court records don't specify the identity of this potential connection, but something about it struck a nerve with Domain when he learned about it. Perhaps it was someone he had previously expressed concerns about. Maybe it was the timing or context that aroused his suspicion. Whatever the specific trigger, this digital interaction became the flashpoint for their final argument. Little did the community know that as they began their Sunday morning routines, a tragedy was unfolding behind the closed doors of the Reed Wallace home. By the time church bells rang across Jackson, one life had been extinguished and another forever altered, all because of a Facebook friend request and the fatal escalation that followed. Domain Reed was 33 years old when his life ended in that bedroom confrontation. A native of Atlanta, Georgia, he had made Jackson, Mississippi his home after moving there several years earlier. Those who knew Domain described him as a goal-getter who tried several jobs to make money. He held strong opinions and maintained firm boundaries in his relationships. Friends spoke of Domain as someone who had built generational wealth through various business ventures. Though the exact nature of his businesses remained somewhat private, Domain had developed a reputation as a man who provided well for his family. As a father, he made sure his children had everything they needed. He was also known as a devoted husband who took pride in his relationship with Rashan. Domain was a good man, a childhood friend from Atlanta recalled. He came to Jackson with big dreams and actually made them happen. That's rare. His social circle described him as someone who valued loyalty and expected the same in return, qualities that would ultimately play a significant role in how he responded to perceived threats to his relationship. Meanwhile, Rashan Wallace's path to becoming a 30-year-old nurse had taken unexpected turns. Before entering healthcare, Rashan had pursued a career as a rapper. Her music videos, still available online, showcased a free-spirited young woman with dreams of music stardom. "Hey, cost a lot of money just like this watch," she rapped in one video. "My kicks on my feet, better not play with me. It cost you when you expletive with me." Though her music career never gained traction, those who knew Rashan admired her persistent spirit. When her rap aspirations didn't materialize, she pivoted dramatically, enrolling in nursing school and eventually graduating as a registered nurse. This career transition demonstrated a practical resilience that impressed Domain when they first met. Domain fell in love with Rashan's refusal to give up, a friend explained. She kept pushing even when things didn't go as planned. Their relationship moved quickly. Domain, captivated by Rashan's determination and charm, soon proposed. They married shortly thereafter and started a family. As someone who had life planned out, Domain embraced his role as husband and father with the same dedication he brought to his business ventures. On social media, Domain and Rashan cultivated an image of marital bliss that made many followers envious. Their feeds featured professional photo shoots, candid moments of family joy, and public declarations of love that garnered hundreds of admiring comments. Another year, another adventure. Domain posted on Rashan's birthday, "I cherish every moment we have together and applying more pressure to keep a smile on your beautiful face." In another post he wrote, "Damn, I got taste for some chocolate. Wash CW. I crave this beautiful queen every day." Rashan responded with equally affectionate posts, "Wishing the love of my life, my husband, a very special happy birthday. Let's turn up like we always do. Every day is our birthday. Lol." The couple's online presence carefully curated an image of the perfect relationship, a stark contrast to the tensions that had begun to simmer beneath the surface. Friends later revealed that while their social media projected harmony, private conversations told a different story. As their marriage progressed, subtle signs of discord emerged. Rashan's continued enthusiasm for social media, particularly her expanding circle of online connections, became a point of contention. Domain, who valued privacy and loyalty, grew increasingly uncomfortable with what he perceived as Rashan's excessive online networking. It was recorded by some friends that they noticed brewing tension growing between them. One acquaintance later told investigators, "Rashan's expanding network of online contacts became a bone of contention between the two." While Rashan dismissed Domain's concerns as overprotectiveness, framing her online activities as network building essential for her nursing career, the issue continued to create friction. Friends noticed how Domain would sometimes become visibly agitated when Rashan spent time on her phone, especially when she smiled or laughed at messages from people he didn't know. He didn't feel like her source of happiness anymore, a close friend explained. She seemed to gain joy from social media. This pained Domain dearly. The community's perception of the couple varied. To casual observers and online followers, Domain and Rashan represented relationship goals, a successful businessman and a dedicated healthcare professional building a beautiful life together. Their neighbors, however, occasionally overheard arguments that suggested a more complicated reality. "You could sometimes hear raised voices," said one neighbor. "Nothing that seemed dangerous, but enough to know that what they showed online wasn't the whole story." Family members later acknowledged the discrepancy between the couple's public image and their private struggles. Rashan's cousin noted, "They looked so good together in pictures. Domain would always post about how beautiful she was, but behind closed doors, they were figuring out their boundaries, especially around social media. He was old school about some things, and she was very much living in the digital age." For Rashan, the transition from aspiring rapper to healthcare professional represented a significant personal evolution. When her music career stalled rather than giving up, she channeled her energy into education. Nursing school presented challenges that tested her determination, but she persevered, eventually earning her credentials and securing employment in a field where she could help others. Colleagues described Rashan as competent and caring, someone who brought vibrance to her interactions with patients. "She had this way of making people feel comfortable," one fellow nurse recalled. "Patients loved her because she was real with them, no pretense." These parallel journeys, Domain building his business empire while Rashan established her healthcare career, initially complemented each other well. They represented a power couple overcoming obstacles and creating success on their own terms. Yet beneath this carefully constructed narrative, the fundamental differences in how they approached life, particularly their digital lives, were creating fissures in their relationship that would ultimately crack wide open on that fateful February morning. A Facebook friend request would become the breaking point for tensions that had been building for months, if not years. Sunday mornings in Mississippi typically bring a certain calm, families preparing for church, others enjoying a leisurely breakfast, neighbors exchanging waves as they collect their newspapers. February 23, 2025, began no differently on Brook Hollow Drive, where Domain Reed and Rashan Wallace were starting their day. Around 8:30 a.m., according to the police report, Rashan was scrolling through her phone, a routine morning activity for millions. The notification appeared, a new friend request on Facebook. She accepted it without much thought, adding another connection to her growing social network. In her profession as a licensed practical nurse, maintaining connections with colleagues and former classmates was common practice. Domain entered the room shortly after 9 a.m. He had been in the kitchen making coffee when he heard the distinctive notification sound from his wife's phone. Something about her reaction, perhaps a smile or a quick message sent in response, caught his attention. "Who's that?" he asked, his tone already carrying an edge that Rashan recognized from previous arguments. "Just someone from work," she replied, but Domain wasn't satisfied with her answer. He asked to see her phone, a request that immediately shifted the morning's atmosphere. Rashan hesitated, which only intensified his suspicion. When she finally handed over the device, Domain scrolled through her recent activity and discovered the newly accepted friend request. By 9:15 a.m., what began as a question had escalated into accusations. According to Rashan's later statement to investigators, Domain became fixated on this new connection, demanding to know the nature of their relationship. Was this person more than a colleague? Why hadn't she mentioned them before? "You're always hiding things," Domain reportedly said, his voice rising as he paced the bedroom. "I see how you're always on your phone, smiling at messages when you think I'm not looking." Rashan denied any impropriety, attempting to explain that networking was important in her field, but her explanations only seemed to fuel Domain's anger. The argument continued to escalate, with neighbors later reporting they heard raised voices coming from the Reed-Wallace residence around 9:30 a.m. By 9:45 a.m., the verbal confrontation had reached a breaking point. According to Rashan's statement, Domain's anger had transformed into intimidating behavior. He stood over her, pointing his finger inches from her face, his words becoming increasingly accusatory and personal. "You think I don't know what you're doing? You think I'm stupid?" he shouted. According to Rashan's account, it was at this moment, feeling cornered in their bedroom, that Rashan made the decision that would forever alter both their lives. She moved toward the nightstand drawer where they kept a handgun for home protection. The presence of firearms in approximately 40% of American households creates a volatile element in domestic disputes. Studies consistently show that access to guns significantly increases the lethality of domestic violence incidents. For Rashan and Domain, the gun in their nightstand was about to transform their argument from a heated exchange into a homicide. At approximately 9:50 a.m., Rashan retrieved the weapon. According to her statement, she initially intended it as a deterrent, a way to create space between herself and her increasingly agitated husband. "Back up," she told him, her nursing hands now gripping the firearm. "Just back up and let me leave the room." Domain, perhaps shocked by the sudden appearance of the weapon, or perhaps too angry to process the danger, continued to advance toward her. The bedroom, once their shared intimate space, had become a confrontation zone with no easy exit. At 9:52 a.m., Rashan fired the first shot, what she would later describe to investigators as a warning shot. Aimed at the ceiling, the sound reverberated through the house, surely alerting neighbors that something was terribly wrong at the Reed-Wallace residence. Yet remarkably, no one called 911 at this point, perhaps assuming the noise was a car backfiring or some other benign explanation. The warning shot, created a momentary pause. For a few seconds, both Domain and Rashan stood frozen, perhaps equally surprised by the reality that their argument had reached this point. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the room. Plaster dust from the ceiling floated down like snow. This was the critical moment, the last opportunity for de-escalation. In Rashan's statement to police, she claimed she told Domain, "Please just let me go. I don't want this to get worse." But according to her account, Domain's response was to move toward her again, perhaps believing she wouldn't actually turn the weapon on him. "You think that scares me," he reportedly said. "Give me that before you hurt yourself." As Domain reached toward her, Rashan fired the second shot at 9:54 a.m. Unlike the warning shot, this one found its target. The bullet struck Domain in the chest, and he immediately collapsed onto the bedroom floor. The transformation was instant, from husband to victim, from nurse to shooter. Rashan dropped the gun and rushed to Domain's side, her professional training kicking in as she assessed his wound. Blood was spreading quickly across his t-shirt, and his breathing was already becoming labored. At 9:56 a.m., Rashan called 911, her voice frantic as she reported the shooting and began performing CPR. The dispatcher instructed her to continue resuscitation efforts until emergency services arrived. For nearly 10 minutes, Rashan pressed on her husband's chest, attempting to keep him alive even as his blood covered her hands. Emergency services arrived at 10:07 a.m., but it was already too late. Domain Reed was pronounced dead at the scene at 10:14 a.m. The Facebook friend request that had appeared on Rashan's phone less than 2 hours earlier had set in motion a sequence of events that ended with her in handcuffs, being led from their home as neighbors watched in shock from their driveways. In the seconds between the warning shot and the fatal bullet, time seemed to slow down for both Rashan Wallace and Domain Reed. These critical moments, spanning less than 2 minutes, represent what psychologists call the point of no return in violent confrontations, a psychological threshold where rational thought gives way to pure emotional reaction. For Rashan, the warning shot represented her final attempt at creating boundaries. As a healthcare professional, she was trained to assess threats and respond appropriately to protect herself and others. But in that bedroom, her professional training collided with the intense emotions of a domestic dispute. The gun in her hand had transformed from a deterrent into an active threat. Experts in domestic violence incidents note that warning shots often create a dangerous psychological shift for the person firing it, crossing a significant threshold, moving from threatening violence to actually engaging in it. Once that line is crossed, subsequent shots become psychologically easier to fire. For Domain, the warning shot presented a critical choice: de-escalate or continue. According to Rashan's statement, he chose the latter. What drives someone to advance toward an armed person who has already demonstrated willingness to fire? Psychologists suggest several possibilities. First, there's the element of disbelief. Many victims of domestic shootings simply cannot process that their partner would actually harm them intentionally. Second, there's the aspect of perceived control. Domain may have believed he could take the weapon from Rashan before she fired again. Finally, there's the influence of heightened emotion. Anger can override self-preservation instincts, pushing people to make decisions they would never make in a calmer state. As Domain moved toward Rashan despite her warning, he reportedly said, "You think that scares me? Give me that before you hurt yourself." These words suggest he still believed he maintained control of the situation, a tragically incorrect assessment. The Brook Hollow Drive neighborhood transformed within minutes of the first police cruiser's arrival. Yellow crime scene tape created a perimeter around the Reed Wallace residence as neighbors gathered in small clusters, exchanging theories and expressions of disbelief. For many, this was their first direct encounter with violent crime in their community. The bedroom where Domain Reed died became the focal point of the investigation. Crime scene technicians photographed the warning shot's impact in the ceiling, the blood-soaked carpet, and the position of the 9mm Glock that Rashan had dropped after firing the fatal shot. They collected gunshot residue samples from both Rashan's and Domain's hands, standard procedure to verify who had fired the weapon. In the living room, officers found Rashan's phone on the coffee table, still open to Facebook. The notification that had triggered the argument remained visible on the screen. Investigators took screenshots and secured the device as evidence, knowing that digital forensics would play a crucial role in establishing the timeline of events. The gun, a 9mm handgun registered in Domain's name for self-defense, was used against him by his own wife. Investigators carefully documented its position and collected prints to determine handling patterns. The impact of the warning gunshot was photographed, alongside the blood-soaked carpet and other key evidence at the scene. Meanwhile, at the police station, Rashan Wallace sat in an interview room still wearing her blood-stained clothes. After being read her Miranda rights, she provided her account of the morning's events. She described the argument over the Facebook friend request, Domain's increasing agitation, her fear as he approached her, the warning shot, and finally the fatal decision to fire directly at him when he continued to advance. "I just wanted him to back away," she repeated several times during the interview. "I didn't mean to kill him. I was scared." After consulting with the district attorney's office, police formally charged Rashan Wallace with second-degree murder. Despite her cooperation and lack of prior criminal history, prosecutors cited the severity of the offense in requesting substantial bail. The following morning, Rashan appeared before the judge for her arraignment, still visibly shaken and now dressed in standard-issue jail clothing. She entered a preliminary plea of not guilty. The judge set bail at $50,000, an amount that reflected both the seriousness of the charge and Rashan's ties to the community that reduced her flight risk. News of the shooting spread quickly through Mississippi media outlets. The headline, "Nurse Charged with Murdering Husband Over Facebook Friend Request," captured public attention, with local TV stations featuring the story prominently in their evening broadcasts. The woman who allegedly shot and killed her husband was given a $50,000 bond in Jackson Municipal Court today, reported one news anchor. Police say around 11:30 yesterday morning, 30-year-old Rashan Wallace shot and killed 33-year-old Domain Reed after an argument over social media escalated. It happened on Brook Hollow Drive in Jackson. Wallace is charged with murder. The community's reaction was mixed. Some neighbors expressed shock that Rashan, known professionally as a compassionate caregiver, could commit such an act. Others speculated about what might have been happening behind closed doors in the months leading up to the shooting. "They always seemed like a normal couple," said neighbor Dorothy Williams to a local reporter. "But you never really know what goes on inside someone else's marriage, do you?" At Rashan's workplace, colleagues expressed disbelief. "She was always so level-headed in crisis situations," one fellow nurse told investigators. "Something must have pushed her to an absolute breaking point." As Rashan remained in custody, unable to immediately post the $50,000 bond, investigators continued building their case. They interviewed friends, family members and colleagues of both Rashan and Domain, attempting to construct a more complete picture of their relationship dynamics before the fatal confrontation. However, an alternative narrative began emerging in social media discussions and community gossip. Some people close to the couple suggested the story about the Facebook friend request was covering up a more explosive truth, that Domain had caught Rashan with another man in their home. "I know them personally," one comment on a news post read. "The lady is taking the fall for her boyfriend." Another comment stated, "I have seen somebody that knows them." She said she is covering for her boyfriend. She said the husband and the boyfriend got into it, and that's who killed him. These competing narratives created confusion about what really happened that morning on Brook Hollow Drive. Was this a case of jealousy over a simple Facebook friend request that spiraled out of control? Or was there a third person involved, a boyfriend Rashan was protecting by claiming responsibility for Domain's death? Police indicated they were investigating all possibilities, but the evidence collected at the scene seemed to support Rashan's version of events. No third person was seen entering or leaving the residence on neighbors' security cameras, and the gunshot residue patterns were consistent with Rashan's account. If convicted of second-degree murder, Rashan faced 20 to 40 years in Mississippi State Prison. Her nursing license was immediately suspended pending the outcome of the case, effectively ending the career she had built after her dreams of musical stardom faded. The impact on their children was immediate and devastating. Now without both parents, one dead, the other facing decades in prison, they were placed in the care of extended family members who struggled to explain the incomprehensible situation. The case sparked intense online debates about relationship boundaries in the digital age. Many commenters sided with Domain, arguing that spouses should have full access to each other's social media accounts. Others defended Rashan's right to privacy and questioned Domain's controlling behavior. The conversation quickly evolved beyond the specifics of the case to broader questions about trust, privacy, and the role of social media in modern marriages. One particularly poignant comment on a news article about the case read, "2 lives destroyed over a Facebook friend request. Was it worth it?" Before you get angry about who your partner is talking to online, ask yourself, is this worth dying for? Is this worth killing for? As the legal process continued, the once active social media accounts of both Domain and Rashan became digital memorials, frozen in time, their last posts now read with the heavy knowledge of what would follow. The case of Domain Reed's death and Rashan Wallace's murder charge transcends the tragic circumstances of their personal story. It serves as a powerful reminder of how quickly domestic situations can escalate from disagreement to deadly violence, especially when firearms are accessible during heated moments. In the days following the shooting, the Jackson community responded with initiatives aimed at preventing similar tragedies. Local churches organized workshops on healthy relationship boundaries in the digital age. The Jackson Police Department enhanced their domestic violence response training, incorporating scenarios involving arguments over social media and digital privacy. This case has forced us to recognize how social media is changing the landscape of domestic disputes, said the Jackson police chief during a community forum. 20 years ago, we weren't responding to calls about Facebook arguments turning violent. Now it's becoming more common. For mental health professionals, the Reed-Wallace case highlights how seemingly trivial triggers can activate deeper relationship issues. Dr. Elaine Carpenter, a relationship counselor in Jackson, noted, "What appears to be an argument about a Facebook friend request is rarely just about that. It's usually about trust, respect, boundaries, and control, fundamental aspects of any relationship that need ongoing negotiation." Warning signs were present in the months before the shooting, but like many situations involving escalating tension, they were easier to identify in retrospect. Friends recalled Domain's increasing discomfort with Rashan's social media activities. They remembered Rashan dismissing his concerns as controlling behavior rather than recognizing his insecurity. The occasional arguments about online boundaries that neighbors overheard represented opportunities for intervention that passed unnoticed. What we see in cases like this, explained social worker Jamila Washington, is that neither person typically recognizes when they're approaching a point of no return. By the time a weapon enters the situation, rational decision-making has often been replaced by pure emotional reaction. The digital age has fundamentally transformed relationship dynamics, creating new territories for conflict that previous generations never had to navigate. Couples today must explicitly discuss boundaries around social media interactions, online friendships, and digital privacy, conversations that were unnecessary just 20 years ago. For those in potentially volatile relationships, resources exist but remain underutilized. The Jackson Crisis Center reported a 30% increase in calls after Domain's death made headlines, suggesting many people recognized similar warning signs in their own relationships, but had previously hesitated to seek help. The ripple effects of this tragedy extended far beyond the immediate families. Domain's business associates, Rashan's patients, their children's teachers and friends, all were impacted by the sudden violence that erupted that Sunday morning. Their story became a cautionary tale discussed in living rooms throughout Mississippi and beyond. Would you recognize the warning signs if a relationship in your life was heading toward potential violence? Do you know when an argument has crossed the line from heated disagreement to dangerous confrontation? Understanding these thresholds could literally save lives. The most haunting aspect of the Reed Wallace case is its preventability. Had either Domain or Rashan stepped back from the confrontation, had they established clearer digital boundaries earlier in their relationship, had they sought counseling when tensions first emerged, any of these actions might have prevented the tragedy. A Facebook friend request, something millions of people send and accept every day without a second thought, became the trigger for an irreversible chain of events. This reality forces us to confront how the mundane aspects of our digital lives can activate deep-seated emotions with potentially devastating consequences. As social media continues to integrate into every aspect of modern relationships, couples must develop new skills for navigating digital boundaries. The lesson from Domain and Rashan's story isn't about limiting social connections or avoiding technology. It's about communicating expectations clearly, respecting boundaries, and recognizing when minor disagreements are actually symptoms of deeper relationship issues. Perhaps the most important legacy of this case is the stark reminder it provides. In the heat of an argument, when emotions are high and judgment is clouded, the presence of a firearm transforms a temporary conflict into a potentially permanent tragedy. For Domain Reed and Rashan Wallace, what began as a Sunday morning scroll through social media ended with one life extinguished and another forever altered, all because of a Facebook friend request and the fatal escalation that followed.